us who hear that where we have the pastoral prayer and the Lord's Prayer, we will also have communion at that time, so be prepared for that. If you're able, please stand and join me for the call to worship. We come before our God, who is full of compassion.
We seek God's forgiveness and mercy.
When we consume more than our share,
Forgive us, merciful God.
when we are blinded by our affluence,
Forgive us, merciful God.
when possessions cloud our view of you,
Forgive us, merciful God. Let us worship the Lord.
please join me, remain standing and join me as we sing our first hymn, O Jesus, I Have Promised, on page 676. Faithful and loving God, we confess that we have not lived in faith and love. You offer us the gift of salvation, but we spend our lives in vain pursuits. You provide enough for all to share, but we store up treasures for ourselves. Forgive us, God of grace. Teach us to seek the way of heaven and to let go of earthly desires, so that we might have abundant life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Friends, hear and proclaim the good news.
In Jesus Christ we are forgiven. Thanks be to God.
that we may receive what you have revealed and do what you have commanded. Amen. And our scripture reading for today is found on Pew Bible, page 526, Psalm 107, verses 1 through 9. And I'll read that for you. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from trouble and gathered them from the lands, from the east and from the west, from the north and from the south. Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to a city to dwell in. Hungry and thirsty, their souls fainted within them. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He led them by a straight way till they reached a city to dwell in. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wonderful works to the sons of men. For he satisfies him who is thirsty, and hungry he fills with good things. And the next reading is from Luke 12, verses 12 through 21, and page 905 in your Pew Bible. One of the multitude said to him, Teacher, bid my brother divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or divider over you? And he said to them, Take heed and beware of all the covetousness, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man brought forth plentifully, and he thought to himself, What shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops? And he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my good grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So he who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich toward God. This is the word of the Lord.
All right. This morning we heard the parable that Jesus told to this man who came up and he wanted some advice. He wanted Jesus really to resolve this issue of dividing inheritance with his brother. And Jesus gives this parable. And it's often called the parable of the rich fool. The rich fool. Now, it's not often in the Bible that there is a story where God, or there's a story where Jesus has God calling someone a fool. But in this particular instance, God, in this parable, according to Jesus, called this person a fool. A fool. Now, I haven't often been called rich, but quite often I have been called a fool. I don't know why, but people have said that about me. But anyway, I think we can identify with that fool part, but for most of us sitting here in the sanctuary this morning, that idea of being rich is not something that we really associate ourselves with. You know, we don't think of ourselves as being rich, even though if we think about it in comparison to the vast majority of the people in the world, we know we are rich. But there are so many people that have so much more than we do. So that label of being rich, and we hear this parable of the rich fool, well, we can listen to the parable but think, it doesn't really apply to us because I'm not rich. I don't really, I'm not wealthy. I'm not rich. I don't have that much. So I'll listen to it and see what Jesus said, but it doesn't really apply to me. Well, Jesus was telling this parable to a huge group of common people in Jerusalem at his time, on his way. He was almost in Jerusalem when this particular parable was told. He was not talking just to wealthy people. The vast majority of the people that he's talking to actually were poor people. I mean, dirt poor people that had very little. There might have been a few more, maybe what we would call middle class, that most of us would more associate with. Middle class kind of people in the crowd. Probably not too many, because there wasn't much of a middle class at that time. And I doubt that there were probably any wealthy people at that time within Jesus' earshot when he was telling this particular parable. So he wasn't talking to the wealthy. He wasn't talking to the rich. Jesus gave this parable for us to try to listen to try to understand, and to try to figure out what does it mean to us. And one of the questions that I always have and always think about when I read this particular parable is, are we rich? Are we rich? We'll consider that for a moment. Shall we pray? Gracious God, may the words of my lips and the meditations of our hearts and minds be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Certainly want to be careful not to step on that tomato. Okay. As I said, most of us know this particular parable by the title, The Parable of the Rich Fool. And it's about a farmer, and this particular farmer in the parable that Jesus told was rich by society's standards at that particular time. He unfortunately, however, was distracted by what he considered were his possessions. And it's so easy to get lured into that trap of materialism. There are so many traps that are luring people toward riches and getting rich quick. Certainly in Jesus' time, and certainly in our time today too. I didn't hear, did anyone hit the big Powerball last night?
478 one winner.
What?
478 million one winner.
There was one winner. All right, okay, so there was a winner, so the Powerball's not going to be as much next week, sorry. No, I wasn't. Was it somebody here in St. Genevieve? Is it somebody new, Tom? No, it's not.
New Hampshire.
What?
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Darn. Okay, all right. The latest statistics that I could find in doing a quick search a couple of weeks ago looking at this was 2010. And there were statistics from 2010, that was a census year, and so there were a lot of different questions that were asked of the population of the United States in 2010. And during that year, 3 out of 4 Americans spent money on some type of gambling during the year 2010. 3 out of 4, that might have been a lottery ticket. That would have been considered one type of gambling, or any other kinds of gambling, waging on sports. No, nobody does that. I know, but all the different things. 3 out of 4, 75% of everyone in this country use some of their hard-earned money to take a chance, to take a minuscule chance that they might be the big Powerball winner and have $478 million. 3 out of 4. I mean, that statistic just floored me. Now, this is 2016. Now, 6 years later, we're probably not doing that anymore, right? It's probably down to maybe, I don't know, not down very much, I would guess. I would probably say 75% of everyone in this country, in one way or another, during a calendar year, gambles. That lure of wealth and possessions and money is still enormous today. Still enormous today, just as it was in Jesus' time. But in Jesus' time, there was no yachts, there were no limousines, there were no private jets that you could have, but there were still lots of people that were distracted with material possessions. And this desire for earthly possessions is very much evident in this passage that we heard from Luke, and Jesus' response to that. Because a man comes up to Jesus and he asks him to settle this inheritance dispute between two brothers, between him and his brother. We're not provided with many details here, except that this one brother that's talking to Jesus is worried about some part of his inheritance, what he feels is due to him. Now, Jewish people were very much aware that inheritance laws were dealt with in the book of Moses, in our Old Testament. They're still there. You can go read them if you want. And all the inheritance laws that the Jewish people abided by. A firstborn son, for example, should receive a double portion. Receive twice what any of the others received, and then it would be divided up among the other sons. Daughters, sorry, you were sort of left out in the cold. But the firstborn son got that double portion. And there were lots of other rules. Lots of rules, lots of inheritance laws that are still there in the book of Moses, and you can go back and check them out and go all the way into Leviticus, and find out what they had to say there in Leviticus. And the reason for that, the reason that the Jewish tradition, and we still find it in our Old Testament Bible, in Leviticus, is because people believed that God owned everything. God owned the land. God owned everything that came from the land. The people were simply God's tenants on this land. So it was God's representatives then who made the rules about how God's things were to be divided. Nevertheless, even with all the rules that he could have found in Leviticus, which were around at the time of Jesus, when this man was asking Jesus, he still goes to Jesus and he says, hey, help me out here. I want to make sure I get my fair share or more, perhaps. And so he tries to get Jesus involved in this inheritance dispute. And in reply, Jesus immediately takes this opportunity to teach, not just that man, but to teach everyone in the crowd, all the people that were there, using the example that the brother had brought up. And Jesus starts out with this warning. He says, watch out. Be on your guard against greed. Be on your guard against greed. He didn't say be on your guard against having too many possessions. He didn't say be on your guard against having too much money. He said be on your guard against greed. And Jesus is not only replying to the brother, he's addressing all the people when he says that. Be careful about greed. Because Jesus knew that the issue of materialism and that desire for more possessions is not just isolated to one individual person, and certainly is not isolated just to the rich, or certainly is not isolated just to someone who doesn't have anything, the poor, but it's all people have to be careful about that desire for possessions. And so Jesus gives this parable, this famous parable of the rich farmer. And he says, this guy's a farmer. He has an abundant crop, because God has provided the rain and the sun for the righteous and for the unrighteous. So we don't know whether that farmer was righteous or unrighteous. It doesn't matter to this story. They believed in God, and we believe. I heard it from Professor Science even, that God controls all. That God creates all. All that grows and all that happens is a part of God's creation. And so it's a sovereign God who would have blessed that rich farmer in Jesus' parable with his abundant crop. God's blessing for an abundant crop leads the farmer into this dilemma over so much production. Wow, it's a welcome dilemma, but man, my fields have produced so much. I've got so much stuff. I don't even have any room to put it. I don't have a place to put it. And so the farmer says, okay, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger barns. I'm going to make bigger places so that I can store all the food that I've been able to produce. Please notice that it was not the fact that this farmer expanded his operation that provoked Jesus' warning. No, not at all. Do not necessarily view this farmer in a negative way. I think too often we do that. We say this farmer, whoa, is a rich farmer. That's bad being a rich farmer. No, it wasn't bad because he was a rich farmer. Farmers in ancient times, just like farmers today, are encouraged to maximize their productive land. Being able to feed the people has been a necessity throughout all of mankind's history. And farmers are the key to that. They're the key component so that we can eat. We want farmers to be able to produce as much as they can. That's a push that society has had as long as there's been societies. We need farmers to produce as much as they can. That's all. And so this farmer, it only made sense that if he didn't have enough room to keep all of his goods, okay, well, let's build some bigger barns. Let's have a bigger area to hold all of this food that's being produced, and so more and more people could be fed. Where his old barns once stood, he built new, spacious, and efficient facility. That was not wrong. For he was a good farmer. And it appears he was also a good businessman in this particular parable. His first error, however, was that this particular farmer, this particular man, did not include God in his plans. He didn't include God in the plans that he had made. Do you notice, if you read back through that scripture in Luke 12, how the words I, my, and myself are repeated over and over again by that farmer? In just a few short verses, in verses 17 and 18 alone, those words appear 9 times. In 2 verses, he's saying I, or my, or myself. He's only talking about himself. God is nowhere in this man's thought process. The farmer desires more possessions because he's missing a desire for God. The man wants to be in complete control. This farmer, he wants to be in complete control, and he's not reflecting any trust in God. He's just distracted by what he thinks of as his possessions. No thought at all for God. That's his first error in this particular parable. The second error that I think the farmer makes is that he builds the barns and he stores the grain in order that he may take it easy. Everything's all about himself. He works so that he may eat, so that he may drink, so that he may be merry. His goal in life seems to be to store up this bumper crop so that he can take life easy. It's all about him. His labor is focused on himself. Not to mention, there's no sharing of this crop with God or with those in need. He does not even recognize that it is God who blessed him with the abundant crop in the first place. From a worldly perspective, the farmer has managed quite well, but from a moral and from a spiritual perspective, he has mismanaged his abundance. This parable does not only point out sins of commission, but sins of omission. What I was talking to the kids and the youth about. The farmer gave no thought to the needs of others. He was thinking only of himself. He had no regard for God. And he had no regard for God's will, which is to love. To love God and to love neighbor. He had no desire to share his abundance with anyone. All of this was his abundance. It was his, and he was in control of it. No thought about God. No thought about others. We then take a look at verse 19 in Luke 12 here, and it reads, I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample good. Now in this verse, the word that we translate as soul, it means more than just the living being. The man is also referring to his inner being, the complete being of who he is. The farmer is telling his soul, himself, the composite of what he is, that, hey, I'm set. I'm going to say to my soul, we're good. You know, everything's good with the world. You know, I can take life, take it easy. I can eat and drink. I can be merry. The farmer is thinking that he's even in control of his own soul. Everything about himself, even his very soul, he controls it. That same word, soul, that we translate as soul, is used again when God demands the farmer's life. God is demanding his soul, all of who he is, from him. God, being the sovereign God, intervenes and interrupts the plan of the farmer. God not only demands the man's soul, but calls the man a fool. A fool. Now that was interesting. It's always been interesting to me, this parable. It's called the rich fool. And the word, once again, that we translate as fool, well, it's used in several other places in the Bible. 2 places I pulled out, Psalm 14 and Psalm 53. Psalm 14, it says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. So if you have no regard for God, if you say there is no God, if you live your life as if there is no God, that's a fool, being foolish. That's the person that is being considered a fool. That's the term that's being used here that we translate as fool. A person who has no regard for God. That's being foolish. The fool excludes himself or herself from God's plans. You just write God out of your life. And the Bible says that is foolish. And so then the farmer is asked this rhetorical question at the end of the parable. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? So we're right back to the beginning again, talking about inheritance. Who's going to inherit the farmer's possessions? And that was a rhetorical question. Because possessions, well, everything that we own is actually God's. It is not ours. We learn from the Old Testament inheritance laws in Leviticus that everything we have is on loan to us by God. Everything that this man called mine, my barns, my grain, my goods, my life, my soul, myself, these are not truly ours. We will not have these possessions forever. God eventually takes it all back because God requires from all of us our soul. The possessions are all God's. They're not truly ours. As verse 21 summarizes, this is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself but is not rich toward God. So God provides the answers to how we are to store possessions. Life is not about being rich in possessions for oneself. Life is in being rich toward God. So it says, don't be greedy, don't be anxious. Everything is truly God's. All of creation is truly God's creation. So our lives should not consist of just desiring possessions. Rather, our lives should consist of desiring God. Of desiring God and God's will. In this parable, I don't think Jesus is preaching against wealth. Not at all. He's preaching about how wealth, which we all have in some form or the other, how our riches, how our wealth is to be directed. How it is to be used. If we have a wealth of hugs or smiles, we should be sharing those with others. That's what Jesus is saying here. Now, there's nothing wrong with making plans for the future and for increasing one's wealth. But, we all try to do that in certain ways because that's what the farmer intended to do. That's what he was doing in this story. And this story does not say that that's wrong at all. But all of those things must be done in consideration of God and of God's will for you and for your life. God's will is that we love God and that we love our neighbors. God's will is that we be rich toward God. And I think that's true whether we're contemplating buying a piece of property, buying a new home, making a business decision, purchasing another vehicle, or even deciding what we're going to contribute to church this year. We must include God in our plans. We must direct our plans according to God's will, according to the very best that we can discern of God's will. That's what God asks of us. He doesn't ask us to be paupers. He doesn't ask us to give away everything that we have. He asks us instead to do things in consideration of God and in consideration of what God's will is for us. Let God be in control. I think that's the message of a rich fool. And this is so easy to say on Sunday morning, particularly up here from the pulpit, and to share it with each other, and we can all say, yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to let God be in control of our lives. Boy, that's much more difficult to put into practice here in the 21st century, isn't it? It's difficult to do that. But it takes a mindset, it takes that thinking, it takes that intention in our lives, not just here on Sunday morning, but every day, every hour, every moment of our lives to say, yeah, I need to put God first. I need to listen and try to discern God's will. What does that mean? What does that mean for me? Okay, we have time to say this. It's a Russian folk tale that I wanted to share with you sort of to close this morning. It's about a farmer also, and I thought of it as, every time I read this parable of the rich fool. There's this Russian folktale. It's about a farmer who was not satisfied with his lot in life. He thought he just didn't have much. He had a small farm, and he just didn't have many possessions. And he said, boy, if I just had more land, life would be so much better. And he got a novel offer one day. And I must admit, I don't remember exactly how it happened in the folk tale, but he was offered some more land for a very, very small price, but there was only one caveat to the whole deal. He could have as much land as he could walk around in circle in one day, from sunup to sundown. As much land as he could walk around in one day in circle. He could buy that for a very small price. He had the money to do it. And he couldn't believe that he'd gotten this offer. You mean as far as I can walk and come around and get back around here from sunup to sundown, I can buy all that land for this small amount of money? Yeah, that was the deal. Well, he's jumping up and down. Hallelujah. Oh my gosh. I mean, he was a fairly young man. He was in good shape, in good condition. He started making his plans immediately about how far he could go and figuring out how much land he's going to be able to walk around. So finally the day came and sun came up and he took off. I mean, he took off in one of the fastest walks you could ever imagine. Taking off, making this huge circle that he could go around. And I mean, he got to one of his first turning points. And boy, he was there a lot earlier than he thought he would ever be able to get there. And I can go further than this. I'm going to go a little further. I can get more land here. I'm going to keep going. And man, he just keeps going and going as fast as he can. It gets about noon. He doesn't even worry about eating his lunch, which he's carrying with him. He said, no, forget that. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to walk through lunch. Then I'll be able to get even more land that I'm going to circle around. We got to the middle of the afternoon. And man, he was getting tired, but boy, he was making up his mind. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this circle even a little broader. And he goes further out and further out. And finally, it gets just an hour or two before sundown, and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm so far away. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it back or not. I'm not going to get back to the starting point, or I'm not going to be able to get all this land. So he starts running. I mean, he starts running just as hard as he can run, which is not very hard at the end of the day after you've been walking all day long with no food, no water, anything. So he's running, and I mean, he's going and going, and finally, he can see the starting point there. It's within his sight, and the sun is almost ready to set up there. And he runs, and he makes the last gasp effort, and he dives, and he gets there just as the sun goes down, and he dies right there on the spot. And a few days later, his friends all gather around, and they put him in that little plot, 6 feet long, 3 feet wide. And the title of this folk tale is, How Much Land Does a Man Need? How much land does a man need? We should not be distracted by our material needs, because if we do, we tend to forget to include God. There's nothing wrong with material possessions. We've got to include God, and we've got to include others in our plans. We have to remember that everything that we have is from God. Everything we have is God's gift to us. We're encouraged to share those gifts with others. Share those gifts that God has given to us. Share with others our possessions. Share with others our love. Share with others our smiles. Share with others our hugs. Share with others our talents. Share with others our time. Give back to God by giving to others. Give back to God by including God in all of your plans. In doing that, if you can do that, then you are truly giving God the glory and giving God the honor. And in doing that, we are truly rich. Let us not get distracted with any material things or material possessions. Let us focus on God's great gifts to us. And let us remember to be rich toward God in all of our life, just as God has been so rich to us. Because you, my friends, are truly rich. Thanks be to God. Amen. Let us now respond to this word by rising, either in body or in spirit, and singing our hymn of response, which is number 692, God Will Take Care of You. Shall we rise and sing? You may be seated. Please join with me now in our affirmation of faith, the Apostles' Creed, which you find printed in your bulletin this morning. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Ghost, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. He descended into hell. The third day he rose again from the dead. He descended into heaven, and sitteth on the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From thence he shall come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Ghost, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. We now come to that place where we recognize how God has been good to us and how we have been blessed by God, and we have an opportunity to give back, to share of many of the ways in which God has blessed us. So be generous when our ushers come forward for our offering this morning as we listen to our choir tonight. offerings this day. We ask that they help bring music into the lives of others throughout this world, that your song, that your stories may be brought to all as your kingdom is spread throughout this land. All these things we ask in your blessed name. Amen. You may be seated. It is always a special bonus when we have the opportunity to approach the Lord's table. And now is the time in this service where that opportunity is before us. This bonus to be able to gather around this table with people from north and south, east and west that come to gather around the Lord's table. And we know, and we must always remember, that this is not a Presbyterian table. It's not a St. Genevieve table. It is not our table. It is the Lord's table. And it is the Lord who invites us to come. If only we believe upon His name, we are invited to come and to gather around this table and to share in this special bonus this day of communing together in the Lord's Supper. Let us pray. Gracious God, we are thankful for the many ways that you bless us. We are truly rich. Be with us now as we pray together the prayer Jesus taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. On that fateful Thursday evening, when Jesus gathered for the final time with His disciples, with His closest friends on this earth, they sat around the table. And as they sat around the table, Jesus took the bread and He broke it. And after blessing it, He gave it to them. And He said, Take, eat. This is my body, broken for you. Whenever you take of this bread, do it in remembrance of me. And in like fashion, after they had completed their meal, as they were still sitting around the table, Jesus took the cup. And after giving thanks for the cup, He gave it to them, saying, This cup represents the new covenant, washed in my blood. Whenever you drink of this cup, do so in remembrance of me. And He shared it with them, just as He now shares it with us. The table has been set. All are invited to come and share in the Lord's Supper. As is our custom here, since it's not printed in your bulletin, I will remind you that as the bread is shared, we ask that you take the bread and hold it until all have been served, and then we will partake of it together in recognition of our fellowship together, of our communion as a fellowship of believers with one another. And then when the cup is passed, you may partake of that on your own whenever you feel so moved, in recognition of your individual relationship with Christ as well. The table has been set. All has been prepared. Come now as we celebrate communion together. Shall we pray? Gracious God, Our true bonus this day is that Jesus gave himself up for us. And we are privileged now to follow him and to call ourselves Christians. For this bonus, we give you thanks this day and every day. Continue to be with us now as we go out in your name. Amen. Let us now rise, either in body or spirit, one last time to sing our closing hymn, which is Take My Life and Let It Be Consecrated to Thee. We're going to sing verses 1, 5, and 6. I believe those are the ones specially marked in your hymnal on page 597, verses 1, 5, and 6. So we rise and sing. This is actual money, but it's not money that you can spend here because it's actually euros or denominations of euro, 10 cents of euros, 20 cents of euros, a few euros that I have left over, spare change from Julia and I's trip to Europe. But as your final bonus today, I'm going to have my scientific assistant, I'm going to have Jacob over here. He's going to hand you one of these euro coins. And you know you can't spend this here in the United States. So this coin is not something you can spend, so it'll just be something you can keep to remind you of the fact that you are rich. You are rich. Not necessarily in money, not necessarily in possessions, but you are rich in God's love. Because we are a people of God. And as long as we put God first, and we put God's will first in our lives, then we are truly rich. We are truly wealthy in our lives. So take one of these coins at your leave. It's your final bonus. It's your reminder of Bonus Sunday. And there are a few brownies, I'm pretty sure, left over if you guys need to check those out. If you need to check the grandma first or whatever, maybe. But there are some brownies left, and that goes for any of you, whether you check with grandma or not. If you want to have some brownies there in the back, be sure that you take those with you. And wherever you are, whatever you are doing this particular week, this first week of August, July is already over when we celebrate Nicole's birthday. That's the end of the month. We're moving into August, and all those things that come with this month, all those changes as hopefully the weather cools down a little, perhaps. Sometimes August is hot, but we're hoping for a little cooler August. Wherever you find yourself, whatever you're doing, remember how rich you are. And remember that you are rich because God is right there with you. God is above you. God is below you. God goes before you. God goes behind you. God stands right beside you. And most importantly of all, God is inside you as well. We are truly rich, my friends. Go in peace. Amen.